Here's a question that doesn't get asked enough. When was the last time you did something you knew was wrong and justified it? Not dramatically wrong. Not stealing or cheating or lying in some obvious, villainous way. Just slightly wrong. A small compromise. A convenient silence. A truth you bent just enough that it didn't quite snap. Let me give you a real example. A nurse notices a colleague falsifying patient charts, nothing dramatic, just small adjustments to make their numbers look better. She knows she should report it. She doesn't. It's complicated, she tells herself. It would create problems. It's probably fine. A week later, one of those patients has a serious complication. The falsified data meant warning signs were missed. And now she's lying awake at 3 in the morning, asking herself, when exactly did I become the kind of person who stays silent? Maybe you've got your own version. You stayed quiet when someone was being treated unfairly because speaking up would have cost you something. You exaggerated your role in a success or downplayed someone else's contribution. You kept a friendship with someone who was awful to others because they were good to you. You saw something dodgy happening at work and told yourself it wasn't your department, wasn't your level, wasn't your problem. Here's the uncomfortable bit, you probably didn't feel like a bad person when you did it. You felt like a good person navigating a complicated situation. You felt reasonable. Pragmatic. You felt like someone making the best of imperfect circumstances. And that's precisely the problem. Because we've built an entire moral framework around the idea that people are either good or bad, ethical or corrupt, principled or compromised. It's clean. It's simple. It fits on a motivational poster. It requires almost no thought. And it's completely detached from how human beings actually operate. Good people do bad things constantly. Not occasionally. Not in moments of spectacular failure. Constantly. Every single day. In small ways, in justifiable ways, in ways that seem entirely reasonable at the time. In ways that don't even register as moral choices because we've become so practiced at not noticing them. And if you think you're the exception, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't do that, or maybe other people, but not me, then you're definitely not paying attention. Confucius understood something that most modern morality hasn't caught up with. Moral life isn't about purity. It's about navigation. It's not about never doing wrong, it's about recognizing when you have, understanding why you did, being honest about what it cost, and figuring out what you're going to do about it now. If you can understand what Confucius saw about moral drift, how it works, why good people fall into it, and how to interrupt the pattern, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Including in yourself. Especially in yourself. This isn't a video about letting yourself off the hook. It's the opposite. It's about finally admitting you've been on it all along. So let's stop pretending. The comfortable lie. Let's start with the lie we tell ourselves every single day, I'm basically a good person. You probably are. Most people are. The vast majority of humans aren't cartoon villains. They're not scheming or malicious or deliberately cruel. They're just people. Muddling through. Doing their best. Mostly. And that mostly is the entire problem. Because what's basically a good person actually means, when you strip away the self-comfort, is this, I haven't done anything I can't explain away. It means your moral accounting stays balanced because you've given yourself permission to round down. The small dishonesties don't count. The minor betrayals were necessary. The times you chose convenience over principle, well, you were tired, or stressed, or it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. This is where most conversations about ethics go spectacularly wrong. They focus on the dramatic moments. The whistleblower who risks everything. the person who stands up to power. The moral hero who makes the grand gesture and gets the film made about them 20 years later. But moral heroism is rare precisely because most of our ethical life doesn't happen in those moments. It happens in the boring bits. In the Tuesday afternoon when you're writing an email and you have to decide whether to include information that makes you look slightly less competent. In the conversation at the coffee machine when someone says something casually bigoted and you have 3 seconds to decide whether you're going to challenge it or let it slide. These moments don't feel important. They don't feel like the stuff of moral philosophy. They feel like minor administrative decisions in the ongoing project of getting through your day without causing unnecessary friction. But here's what Confucius understood, and what we've largely forgotten: character isn't formed in the dramatic moments. It's formed in the boring ones. It's formed in the accumulation of tiny choices that you barely notice you're making. He called this qi, wisdom, or more precisely, moral discernment. The ability to see the ethical dimensions of situations that don't announce themselves as ethical. And his point was that most people don't fail morally because they're wicked. They fail because they're not paying attention. Here's the bit nobody likes to admit: you're probably failing right now, in small ways, and you've convinced yourself you're not. Let's test it. Think about the last week, just 7 days. How many times did you let someone believe something that wasn't quite true because correcting them would have been uncomfortable? Stay silent when someone made a dodgy comment because challenging it felt like too much effort? Take credit for collaborative work, or fail to properly credit someone else? Choose the easier option when you knew the right option was slightly harder? Avoid a difficult conversation because having it would have been awkward? If you're thinking, well, those are tiny things, you're right. They are. They're microscopic. None of them, individually, would qualify as serious moral failures. And that's exactly why they matter. Because Confucius wasn't interested in dramatic villainy. He was interested in the gap. The gap between who you think you are and who you actually are when no one important is watching. The gap between your principles and your practices. That gap? That's where your actual character lives. Not in your intentions. Not in your self-image. But in that gap, in what you actually do when there's no reward for doing right and no obvious punishment for doing wrong. And for most people, that gap is wider than they'd ever want to admit. The Confucian Framework. So how did Confucius approach this? Because he wasn't naive. He wasn't some sheltered philosopher writing abstract treatises. He lived through war, political chaos, exile. He watched governments collapse. He saw people he respected make terrible choices under pressure. His answer wasn't rules. It wasn't a list of commandments. It wasn't never lie or always tell the truth or any other absolute principle that sounds good in theory and becomes impossible the moment real life touches it. His answer was roles. Confucian ethics isn't a system of abstract principles. It's a framework for navigating the mess of competing obligations that make up actual human life. Because you're not just a person. You're a parent, a colleague, a friend, a citizen, a child of aging parents. You hold multiple roles simultaneously, and sometimes those roles conflict. This is where most good people quietly fail. Sometimes doing right by one role means failing another. Sometimes being a good parent means being a less available colleague. Sometimes being a good friend means being disloyal to your employer. Sometimes upholding justice in the abstract means betraying someone you love in the specific. This is where the Confucian concept of yi comes in, righteousness, or situational appropriateness. Yi isn't about following rules. It's about making the correct judgment in a specific context, with specific people, at a specific moment. It's moral intelligence, not moral rigidity. There's a famous passage in the Analects where someone asks Confucius, What if your father steals a sheep and you're the local magistrate? Do you uphold the law and turn him in? Or do you protect your father? And Confucius gives an answer that sounds absolutely scandalous to modern ears. A good son protects his father. A good father protects his son. Righteousness lies in that. Now, to us, raised on ideas of impartial justice and rule of law, that sounds dodgy. It sounds like he's excusing corruption, prioritizing family loyalty over justice. But that's not what he's doing. He's pointing out something we've become remarkably skilled at ignoring: morality doesn't exist in a vacuum. You're not a magistrate in the abstract. You're a magistrate who is also a son. And pretending you can just switch off the son part and act as pure law is a fantasy. The question isn't whether you have conflicting obligations. You do. Always. The question is, how do you navigate them without destroying your integrity? And this is where most people go catastrophically wrong. They think integrity means never compromising. But Confucius knew that integrity in the real world means compromising well, knowing what you're trading, why you're trading it, what it's costing you, and whether that cost is justified. Here's the principle: Yi demands that you act appropriately for the situation you're in. But you don't get to pretend the situation absolves you. Context explains why you made a choice. It doesn't erase the fact that you did. This is the difference between Confucian situational ethics and moral relativism. Relativism says everything depends on context, so nothing is really wrong. Confucianism says everything depends on context, so you have to think harder. Scenario 1: the silence in the room. Let's drag this out of ancient China and into your actual life. You're in a meeting. Nothing dramatic is happening. Someone, a senior colleague, someone with influence, is presenting a project. They're talking about the success, the innovation, the tremendous effort. And as they're talking, you realize they're taking credit for work that was largely done by someone else. Someone junior. Someone not in the room. You know this. Everyone in the room knows this. It's not even subtle. But no one says anything. Because saying something would mean interrupting a senior person. It would mean making the meeting awkward. It would mean positioning yourself as the person who makes trouble, who can't just let things go. So you stay quiet. Everyone stays quiet. The meeting moves on. And afterwards, you tell yourself, it wasn't my place. I'm not the manager. Speaking up would have just made things worse. The junior person will get other opportunities. All of which sounds perfectly reasonable. And all of which is, if we're being honest, complete bollocks. Because here's what actually happened: someone was treated unfairly, you witnessed it, you had the power to say something, and you chose not to because it would have cost you something. Not a lot. Just comfort. Just ease. Just the ability to get through the meeting without friction. This is where most people stop seeing clearly. Confucius would ask, what role were you playing in that moment? You were a colleague. Part of a professional community. And communities have obligations. One of those obligations is not letting lies stand unchallenged when you have the power to challenge them. Your silence wasn't neutral. It was complicity. But when this is where Yi comes in, Confucius wouldn't demand you martyr yourself. Yi isn't about performative heroism. It's about proportional response. Could you have said something smaller? Just to clarify, wasn't Alex heavily involved in that? Could you have followed up privately? Could you have made sure the junior person's contribution was recognized elsewhere? The point isn't that you should have done something heroic. It's that you probably could have done something small, something manageable, and you chose not to because even that felt like too much effort. Remember this: silence isn't neutral. It's endorsement. And now it's a habit. Next time it'll be easier to stay quiet. The time after that, you won't even feel uncomfortable. You'll just automatically stay silent, because that's what you've practiced. Scenario 2, the selective truth. You're applying for a job. You're writing your CV, or preparing for an interview. And you get to the section where you describe your role in a previous project. You weren't lying, exactly. Everything you said was technically true. But you nudged the language. You made your involvement sound slightly more central than it was. You used I instead of we in places where it was definitely we. You emphasized the parts where you led, and left out the parts where someone else led the difficult bits. It's not fraud. It's just presentation. Everybody does it. It's how CVs work. If you don't make yourself sound good, someone else will, and they'll get the job instead. All true. All reasonable. All completely beside the point. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. What did you just excuse this week? Because Confucius would ask a different question. What are you training yourself to become? This is the bit most people miss. Moral compromise isn't just about the immediate act. It's about habituation. It's about what you're teaching yourself is acceptable. Every time you bend the truth slightly, you recalibrate your internal sense of what counts as truth. You're not just lying on a CV. You're practicing a skill. You're training yourself to massage reality in ways that benefit you. And then 5 years later, you're in a meeting, presenting figures, and you massage them slightly to make your department look better. And then you're having a difficult conversation, and you shade the truth to avoid conflict. And then you're testifying about something that went wrong, and you adjust your memory to protect yourself. And each time, it doesn't feel like lying. It feels like strategy. Like presentation. Like just how things work. Because you've spent 5 years training yourself not to notice you're doing it. Every small lie teaches you how to tell the next one. This is what Confucius meant by shoshan, self-cultivation. You're not a static thing. You're a process. Every choice you make shapes the person you're becoming. And if you're making choices based on what can I get away with rather than what kind of person do I want to be, then you're cultivating something you probably don't want to harvest. Scenario 3, the loyal friend. You have a friend. You've known them for years. They're good to you or supportive, funny, always there when you need them. But they treat their partner badly. Not abusively. Not in a way that would justify calling the police. Just badly. They're dismissive. Controlling in small ways. Occasionally cruel. You've seen it. You've been uncomfortable watching it. You've thought about saying something multiple times. But they're your friend. And it's their relationship. And maybe you don't have the full picture. Maybe the partner is difficult in ways you don't see. Maybe it's more complicated than it looks. So you stay silent. You stay loyal. You keep the friendship intact. And you tell yourself, it's not my place. I'm not in their relationship. They're adults. They can figure it out. And all of that is true. And none of it changes the fact that you're watching someone be harmed, and you're choosing not to say anything because saying something would risk a friendship you value. Here's what's actually happening. Confucius would call this a failure of humanity, or moral sensitivity to the well-being of others. Your loyalty to your friend is a real obligation. Friendship matters. But so does your obligation to the person being harmed. By staying silent, you're not being neutral. You're choosing. You're signaling that the friendship matters more than the harm. You would ask, is there a way to be loyal and honest? Can you challenge your friend without destroying the relationship? Can you find the narrow path between betrayal and complicity? Most people don't even try. Because trying is uncomfortable. Loyalty without honesty is just cowardice in disguise. And once you've learned to look away in one context, you'll find it remarkably easy to look away in others. The mechanism: why good people drift. So why does this happen? Why do good people, genuinely well-meaning people who would be horrified to think of themselves as unethical, keep making these small, corrosive choices? 3 mechanisms. 3 psychological processes that operate quietly, constantly, almost invisibly. Mechanism 1: moral fading. Psychologists call this ethical fading, the process by which moral considerations quietly disappear from decision-making. You don't consciously decide to ignore ethics. You just stop seeing the situation as having ethical dimensions. It becomes about strategy, or efficiency, or just getting through the day. The moral component fades into the background, and you make the choice as if it's neutral. This happens constantly in professional contexts. You're deciding whether to approve a budget, whether to hire someone, whether to endorse a decision you're not sure about. And you think about timelines, resources, office politics, what your boss wants, what's expedient. And somewhere in all that thinking, the question, is this right? Just vanishes. Confucius understood this. In the Analects, he talks constantly about attention, about really seeing what's in front of you. He says, the person of Ren is watchful in solitude. Meaning, your moral life depends on whether you notice what you're doing when it doesn't feel important. Most people aren't watchful. They're on autopilot. And in that state, ethics doesn't stand a chance. So remember, the danger isn't evil. It's autopilot. Mechanism 2: diffusion of responsibility. When everyone's responsible, no one's responsible. If you're in a group and something dodgy happens, it's very easy to assume someone else will handle it. Or that someone more senior should be the one to speak up. This is how appalling things happen in plain sight whilst everyone watches and does nothing. Not because everyone's evil. Because everyone's waiting for someone else to act. Confucius rejected this completely. He believed in sphere responsibility. You're accountable for what happens in your immediate sphere of influence. Not the whole world. Not someone else's domain. But your bit? That's on you. If you're in the room when something happens, you're involved. If you're part of the team, you're accountable. You don't get to outsource your moral agency to someone more senior or more willing to deal with awkwardness. Notice what just happened. You probably just thought of a situation where you did exactly this. Where you assumed someone else would handle it. Where you told yourself it wasn't your place. That's the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mechanism 3: the comfort of incrementalism. No one wakes up one day and decides to become unethical. No one has a sudden moral collapse. It doesn't work like that. It happens gradually. One small compromise leads to another. Each one feels justifiable in isolation. But cumulatively, you drift. You drift away from the person you thought you were. You drift into habits you wouldn't have recognized as yourself 5 years ago. And because the drift is gradual, you don't notice it happening. Confucius was obsessed with small things: ritual, daily conduct, the tiny gestures that shape social life. Because he understood that character isn't formed in crisis. It's formed in repetition. You become what you practice. If you practice small dishonesties, you become someone who's comfortable with dishonesty. If you practice looking away, you become someone who doesn't see. The mechanism is simple: you're not failing in the big moments. You're failing in the tiny ones, over and over, until the big moments don't even register anymore. What to do about it? This is where most people stop. They see the problem, feel bad, and move on. Don't. Here's how you actually change. Right. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I've apparently done all of this, so I'm a terrible person, stop. You're not a terrible person. You're a normal person who hasn't been paying attention. And the entire point of Confucian ethics is that you can start. Not dramatically. Not with some grand moral transformation. Just start paying attention. Start noticing. Start asking questions you've been avoiding. 1. Notice when you're justifying. The moment you start explaining to yourself why something is fine, pause. Just pause. Don't act immediately. Not every justification is wrong. Sometimes things genuinely are complicated. But every justification deserves scrutiny. Ask yourself, am I explaining this because it's genuinely complex, or because I don't want to deal with the discomfort of doing what I know is right? Would I be comfortable explaining this reasoning to someone I respect? Would I be comfortable with my child using this exact justification? Confucius talked about self-examination constantly. Not in a guilty, self-flagellating way. Just look at what you're doing. Name it accurately. If you lied, call it lying. Don't call it managing expectations. If you were cowardly, call it cowardice. Don't call it picking your battles. Pause. Notice. Name it. Don't justify. Precision matters. Because once you can name what you're doing accurately, it becomes much harder to keep doing it whilst maintaining your self-image as a good person. 2. Shrink your sphere, then act. You can't fix everything. You can't right every wrong. Trying to will just paralyze you. But you can act in your sphere. The meeting you're in. The email you're writing. The conversation happening in front of you. Stop asking, can I fix this entirely? Will my action actually matter? Start asking, what's the smallest thing I can do right now that moves this towards better? Sometimes that's speaking up. Sometimes it's a private word afterwards. Sometimes it's a question that forces people to think. Sometimes it's just not participating in something you know is wrong. It doesn't have to be heroic. It just has to be something. Confucius believed in incremental cultivation. Not revolution. Not grand gestures. Just do the next right thing. Then the next. Then the next. 3. Track your compromises. This is going to sound odd, but try it, write them down. Not obsessively. Not every tiny decision. But when you notice you've made a choice that doesn't sit right, even a small one, make a note. What did you do? Why did you do it? What did you tell yourself? Don't editorialize. Don't justify. Just record it. A sentence or two. After a month, read back through it. You'll see patterns. You'll see the specific situations where you consistently choose comfort over principle. You'll see the specific justifications you habitually use. And once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. I still catch myself doing this weekly, by the way. Last Tuesday I stayed silent in a meeting when I should have clarified something. I knew it at the time. I did it anyway. And I wrote it down that evening. Not because I'm particularly virtuous. Because without writing it down, I'd have convinced myself it didn't matter by Wednesday. This is the work. It's not exciting. But it's real. For separate context from excuse. This is the key distinction. This is what separates Confucian situational ethics from moral relativism. Context explains why you did something. It doesn't mean you didn't do it. It doesn't erase the choice. Yes, you were tired. Yes, it was complicated. Yes, speaking up would have cost you something. All of that can be true. None of it means you made the right choice. Hold both things at once. I understand why I did it. And it was still wrong. This is yi in practice. Situational judgment means recognizing all the constraints, understanding all the pressures, and then acting as well as you can within those constraints whilst still admitting when what you did fell short. 5. Repair when you can. Most people think that if they've done something wrong and the moment has passed, there's no point addressing it. Better to move on and try to do better next time. But Confucius believed in correction, in going back and mending what you can. Did you stay silent when you should have spoken? You can still speak now. It might be awkward. It might require admitting you should have said something earlier. But you can still do it. Did you take credit unfairly? You can still correct the record. Did you let something slide that harmed someone? You can still acknowledge it. It won't always fix the situation, but it stops the drift. It interrupts the habit of letting things go. 6. Build a practice of conscience examination. Confucian tradition includes something called reflection on the day's conduct. It's simple. At the end of each day, you review what you did. Where did you compromise? Where did you choose ease over integrity? Where did you rationalize something you knew was dodgy? And crucially, where did you do well? Where did you act with integrity even when it cost you something? Both matter. Because self-cultivation isn't about self-flagellation. It's about honest assessment. 5 minutes. Every evening. Just think back through the day and ask, where was I the person I want to be? Where wasn't I? If you only remember one thing from this video, make it this: character is built in the boring repetition of small acts. And if you're not actively building it, you're actively eroding it. The danger of moral complacency. There's another layer to this that needs addressing, because it's where most people get stuck. Once you start paying attention, once you start noticing all the small compromises, there's a massive temptation to do one of two things. Either you spiral into guilt and self-recrimination, deciding you're actually a terrible person, which is both unhelpful and self-indulgent. Or you do the opposite. You acknowledge a few failures, feel appropriately bad for about 20 minutes, and then file that under personal growth and go back to exactly what you were doing before. Confucius would say both responses miss the point entirely. The point isn't guilt. Guilt is useless. It's just another form of self-involvement. It makes you feel like you're doing something whilst actually doing nothing. And the point isn't a brief moment of acknowledgement followed by business as usual. That's just moral theater. The point is sustained attention. Ongoing adjustment. Constant recalibration. Not as a burden, not as some grim moral duty, but as the actual work of being human. Because character isn't something you have. It's something you do. It's not a possession. It's a practice. You don't build good character once and then coast on it. You build it continuously, in every small choice, every day. And if you stop building it, if you stop paying attention, it erodes. Quickly. Invisibly. This is why Confucius emphasized daily practice, ritual, repetition. Not because he was obsessed with formality, but because he understood that character is built in the boring repetition of small acts. And if you're not actively building it, you're actively eroding it. There's no neutral ground. The social dimension. Here's something else that makes this harder: you're not doing this in isolation. You're embedded in communities, workplace, family, friends. And those communities have norms. Unspoken rules about what's acceptable, what's expected, what you can get away with. And here's the uncomfortable truth: most communities normalize small corruptions. Every workplace has its little dishonesties. The way people take credit. The way meetings work. The way certain people are protected whilst others aren't. Everyone knows certain things are wrong, but no one says anything because that's just how things work here. Every friend group has its blind spots. The way you talk about people who aren't there. The way certain behavior gets excused. The way loyalty to the group overrides other obligations. And when you're embedded in these systems, going against the norm feels like betrayal. It feels like you're being difficult, oversensitive, disloyal. This is where most people's attempts at integrity die. Because integrity in practice often means being willing to be uncomfortable in your communities. It means being the person who points out things everyone else is pretending not to notice. Confucius understood this. The concept of li, propriety, isn't about mindless conformity. It's about understanding social obligations whilst not being enslaved by them. And here's his guidance: your primary obligation is to the health of the community, not to comfort within it. Sometimes maintaining harmony means going along with minor things. Not every hill is worth dying on. But sometimes maintaining real harmony, not surface pleasantness, but genuine ethical health, means disrupting false peace. Means saying the thing everyone's avoiding. Means being the awkward person who makes people uncomfortable by noticing what they've agreed not to notice. The skill is in discernment. Knowing which is which. Knowing when silence is complicity and when it's wisdom. And you won't always get it right. You'll stay silent when you should speak. You'll speak when you should have waited. You'll misjudge situations. But you'll do it better if you're paying attention. The long game. Here's the thing about Confucian ethics that's both comforting and terrifying: it's not about winning. It's not about achieving some final state of moral perfection. It's about the lifelong project of becoming slightly less terrible. That sounds bleak. It's not. It's realistic. You're not going to fix yourself. You're not going to reach a point where this becomes easy, where doing the right thing stops requiring effort. Some things will become easier. Some patterns you'll break. Some bad habits you'll replace. But new challenges will emerge. New ways of failing will present themselves. The work doesn't end. It shifts. It evolves. But it doesn't end. This is what Confucius meant by the way, the Tao. It's not a destination. It's a path you walk. And the walking is the point. Most modern self-help wants to sell you transformation. Wants to promise that if you follow these steps, you'll become a better person and then you're done. Confucius would say that's nonsense. You're never done. The moment you think you're done is the moment you stop paying attention. So the practice is lifelong. Not as punishment. Just as the reality of being human. And here's what makes it bearable: you get better at it. Not perfect. Better. The questions become more automatic. The noticing becomes quicker. The correction becomes less painful. And slowly, so slowly you might not notice for years, you become someone you can live with. Not someone perfect. Just someone who's trying, genuinely trying, to close the gap between who they claim to be and who they actually are. Here's the scariest thing: it's not that bad people do bad things. It's that good people stop noticing. That's the real danger. And that's what this entire practice is designed to prevent. 7-day practice. Right. Here's your practice for the next 7 days. Not a lifetime commitment. Not a grand transformation. Just 7 days of paying attention. Each evening, before you go to sleep, ask yourself one question: what did I compromise today? Not what terrible thing did I do. Just, where did I choose the easier path when I knew there was a harder, better one? Write it down. One sentence. No justification. No context. Just name what you did. I stayed silent when X was happening. I let Y believe something that wasn't true. I took credit for Z's work. I avoided a conversation I knew I should have. That's it. Just name it. One sentence per day. By day 7, you'll have a list. And you'll start to see patterns. You'll see the specific situations where your integrity consistently fails. You'll see the specific justifications you habitually use. And here's what you do with that information: pick one pattern. Just one. The one that bothers you most, or the one that seems most manageable. And for the next 7 days, interrupt that pattern once. Not constantly. Not perfectly. Just once in the next week. When that situation comes up, do the harder thing. If your pattern is staying silent in meetings, speak up once. Doesn't have to be dramatically. Just once, say the thing you'd normally keep quiet about. If your pattern is exaggerating your contributions, be precise about credit once. If your pattern is avoiding difficult conversations, have one. Just one. Not perfectly. Just have it. That's the entire practice. Notice for 7 days. Pick one pattern. Interrupt it once in the next 7 days. You're not trying to become a different person. You're just trying to prove to yourself that you can notice what you're doing and then do something different. And then you keep doing that. Notice. Pick a pattern. Interrupt it. Over and over, for months, for years, for the rest of your life. This is Confucian self-cultivation. This is the work. Confucius didn't promise transformation. He promised refinement. Small, steady, relentless refinement. Good people do bad things. Constantly. In small ways, in justifiable ways, in ways that seem reasonable at the time. You do. I do. Everyone does. And the first step towards doing it less is admitting that you do it at all. Not melodramatically. Not with great shows of guilt. Just acknowledging it. Seeing it. Naming it accurately. And then doing something about it. Not everything. Not all at once. Just something. One small correction. One moment of courage. One choice that honors the person you're trying to become. The good news is, you're not a bad person. Most people aren't. The bad news is, that's not enough. Basically, good isn't enough. Not if your best includes all the convenient silences, all the selective truths, all the times you looked away because noticing would have been uncomfortable. The question isn't whether you're a good person. The question is, are you paying attention? Because that's what integrity looks like in practice. Not moral heroism. Not grand gestures. Just paying attention. Noticing. Correcting. Repairing when you can. Doing the small hard thing instead of the small easy thing. Over and over. Every day. Until it becomes, if not automatic, at least familiar. Until you become someone who fails better. Someone who drifts less. Someone who closes the gap between who they claim to be and who they actually are. That's the work. It's not glorious. It's not exciting. But it's real. It's honest. And it's the only way forward that doesn't involve lying to yourself about who you are. Start paying attention. Everything else follows from that. Now, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what's one small compromise you've noticed in yourself this week? Not your biggest moral failure. Just one small thing where you chose comfort over principle. Because once we start naming these things, they become harder to ignore. And if you want to keep exploring this territory, in the next video we'll look at the Confucian art of letting go, how to release guilt and resentment without losing responsibility or becoming morally numb. Because noticing your failures is only half the work. Learning how to move forward without being paralyzed by them is the other half. Until then, pay attention.